right, welcome to day 2. It is so great to see everybody. For how many of you was this your first forum? Awesome. So many of us, this is going on decades, and we were chatting yesterday about how this always feels like a family reunion. And so for those of you that it's your first time, welcome to the family. We are so thrilled you're here, and given the year leading up to this, which we kind of acknowledged yesterday, it's just a huge celebration that we are here together. And when you are having a family reunion, you always want to bring your best friends. And so it is my privilege to introduce Cecelia. Cecelia is the Vice President of Programs at Attendance Works. And for those of you not familiar with Attendance Works, they are a private national organization, and their focus is on increasing attendance and reducing chronic absenteeism. And they see themselves, and the field sees them, as a catalyst for change. So they have had huge impacts in this work. They have been at the White House. They have been working at state, district, and local levels. They do that by raising awareness. They do that by galvanizing research. So when you're hearing about them, they do a lot of the work that you all care about and invest in. And they focus, as we do, on policy systems change and building capacity. So you're understanding why we got so excited to have someone from Attendance Works with us. And Cecelia in particular, she joined them in 2011. And since doing that, she has worked throughout the implementation cascade. So district, intermediate units, states. She geeks out on technical assistance and finding kind of the needs in the field and innovating tools. She is also just such a kind, compassionate, and brilliant technical assistance provider that when she's in a room, she hears what the needs are and finds a way to fill them. She also, just to explain a little more about who she is native to Chicago. So she grew up in Chicago, yes, and she started in Head Start at Stewart Elementary, and she wanted to clarify that doesn't mean she actually knows Harrison Ford, who also started there. She then went to Whitney Ford High School, Whitney Young, I can't read my own handwriting, and clarified she did not know Michelle Obama, who was also an alum there. But the educators there were so supportive that they helped her then apply to and get accepted into Harvard. So I think she needs to write the book, Head Start to Harvard. And then she went to UC Berkeley, where she got her master's in public policy. And perhaps even more impressively, she spent the last few years learning from you all. So she has been so thoughtful about learning about the work we do in PBIS. And so I'm thrilled to turn the mic over to her and have her walk-on music start and get us ready to learn from her about attendance.
So how many of you recognize Tracy Chapman's Give Me One Good Reason? All right. Thought it was appropriate to start with a blues song here in Chicago. And it's an attendance song. Give me one good reason to stay here. Thank you for the warm introduction, Brandy. It is such a pleasure to be here. I am in awe of the work that PBIS has done over the decades and of some of the stars of PBIS in this room. So thank you so much for asking the younger child of tiered intervention systems to join you, attendance. And I just will give you a short piece from Head Start to Harvard, since apparently I'm writing a book that I didn't know about. So when I came to the US, I will not specify the year because then you'll figure out how old I am, I didn't speak English. And my first experience was Head Start at Stewart Elementary School. And how did I get from there to Harvard? Well, part of it was Head Start. And it was being in a place where my language and culture were recognized. I was welcomed, taught how to enjoy and attend school in the US. And from there on, it got better, right? And I have to say, I failed to find it again, but during COVID, when I cleaned out my closets, because we had nothing else to do, right? I found my Head Start graduation folder, and in it was a perfect attendance award. That was really fun, and if I ever find it, I'll post it and you can see. All right, so enough about me. My presentation today is called Stronger Together, Combining Attendance and Behavior. And I really hope that today, my remarks, as somebody who admires PBIS and knows attendance, inspires you to try to combine these two powerful areas of support for our students. So let me start out with just a bit of context and problem definition. Why are we all here? Why are you at PBIS conference listening to a keynote about attendance? Well, first, I think we do see some real challenges that continue to this day. So in a 2024 RAND study, we see that 4 out of 5 teachers are reporting student behavior as a serious problem. I'm gonna go fast over this part because you all know this more than I know, right? But this has led to a lot of teacher stress over behavior and job dissatisfaction. Same thing with chronic absence, by the way. So what's the challenge for students and families we're facing? So here's another piece. The Department of Justice surveyed 12 to 18-year-olds, and they found 19% of students reported being bullied, 39% of that occurring in the classroom, and 22% online. And parallel survey of parents done by Pew, 75% of parents are concerned about bullying. And I know there are a lot of you who study this in the room. You probably have more current figures, but I suspect they're still very, very high. Okay, let me turn to what I actually know much more about, which is student attendance. So we have seen a crisis in student attendance. So beginning in 2015, when we got the federal government, in cooperation with our partners, we got the federal government to start collecting chronic absenteeism data. We saw pretty high levels in 2018, about 16% of the student population. 2022 scared the pants off of us. We hit 30% chronic absenteeism in the nation, 3 out of 10. And it was much higher in some states, some districts. And I remember feeling like Debbie Downer all the time because I would speak to states, districts, schools, and I'd say, we have a crisis. And people would say, don't worry, we'll go back to school and everything will go back to normal. Well, Debbie Downer was right. It did not go back to normal. It came down a bit because many of us worked very, very hard to re-engage our students. And I'm so grateful for those of you who have done that, have made school a welcoming, safe place for students. But many of our students did not come back. And so as of 2024, still high levels, way above pre-pandemic levels. While we don't have 2025 data in a lot of states yet, we're seeing some decrease, but again, only a gradual reduction. So when you think about it, the crisis isn't over. So I'm slinging around this term chronic absence, and I hang around attendance people all the time, but I shouldn't presume that you all know what it means. So quickly, the definition is missing 10% or more of days of school for any reason. So that means excused absences, unexcused absences, days missed due to suspension, those all count towards chronic absenteeism. And why that became a thing, why that became a measure, is that our founder at Attendance Works did the first study in 2006 showing the relationship between days missed, regardless of absences, and third grade reading proficiency. So that was the first study in 2006. That's why I call us the younger sibling, right? Because you all have like a 40-year head start on us. Not feeling competitive, but can I borrow some of the clothing? Yeah, okay, that's great. I digress. So missing 10% really matters, and it's that for any reason. It's different than truancy. It's different than average daily attendance, and I'll tell you why that matters. So when you talk about average daily attendance, which most educators are familiar with, this is just on average how many students show up. It doesn't tell you which students are missing too much school or who are at academic risk. Also, we're very used to talking about truancy, right? If you miss without an excuse, if you skip, well, there will be consequences, right? And truancy only counts unexcused absences. It doesn't count the other days missed. And those are also missed opportunities to learn. So chronic absence, in contrast to the other two, really counts all absences. And it emphasizes the impact of missing school, as well as the benefits of being present. So we really want to think about the more positive, preventative use of our interventions, rather than the traditional scolding, blaming, escalating consequences, et cetera. And it's not just because I grew up in Chicago and you may suspect I have liberal bent. It's because the research shows those ways don't work. They push our kids out more than they bring them back in. So, just a little bit about average daily attendance. So, most of us think 95% is good, because we're used to our 100% grading system. Well, most of us except my parents. So 100% was acceptable. That was an A in my family. And if you got a 95 or a 90 and got a B, I told my children, that means you better try harder. Okay, in terms of attendance though, that actually is true. Because when you look at 95% average daily attendance, how many of you tracked ADA? Quite a few of you. When we first started sharing this, most people would say, I don't have a problem. I have 95% ADA. What are you talking about? So because I'm deeply persuasive, it took me about 5 years to persuade people that they actually had a problem. And that's because we didn't have chronic absence data. But here's an example from hopefully a state that's not represented in this room, and if it is, I apologize. But on the green, you can see that there are 6 schools with different levels of chronic absence. And for the school with the highest level, it's almost over 17%, even though it has 95% ADA. And if you look at the 90% in the blue, that's even higher rates. So that's why we say ADA is great for some things, but it does not tell you who's at risk. It really masks who's chronically absent. So the good news is we now have much more data. We know who and how many students are missing out so much school that they are falling behind academically. And this is the 22-23 data, national data, showing the breakdown for particular student groups. And it was 28% overall that year. And you can see students with disabilities, Pacific Islanders, Black, Hispanic, Native American, all disproportionately chronically absent. And there are deep implications for the other outcomes that depend on good attendance in school. So one last piece of the problem, because I don't want to spend my time with you admiring the problem, I want to talk about some possible solutions. One of the things we did in conjunction with Johns Hopkins was analyze the data from 22-23. And we found some alarming things in the data. Because one thing we know is that when chronic absence hits a certain level in schools, the effects begin to ripple out. It not only affects the students who are absent, it affects all students in the school. So in 22-23, we saw 61% of schools with that high or higher chronic absence rate. So that's where the ripple effects are happening. and it was only 28%. So this is really an issue that is both individual student and entire school. Okay, that's it for the problem. Let's talk about the potential. Why am I so excited to be here with you today? I want to be sure that we're clear why attendance matters. And attendance matters for all sorts of things. It matters from the very beginning in preschool. When students are chronically absent, they fail to hit that first important milestone of reading proficiency by 3rd grade. And when you have students who are poor readers, it makes everything you do harder. And so by middle school, we're seeing students who persist in chronic absence having lower achievement, and if it keeps going, they're more likely to drop out of high school. So that's why I say attendance is the foundation for so much of the work we all do. So I really, really, really believe that we are stronger and better together. We started this conversation between the National PBIS Center and Attendance Works about 2 years ago. I don't see Steve Freeman, but I'm very nearsighted, so hopefully he's here. But we started this conversation with Brandy and Jen and Steve because we thought we could be better together. And then we did another gig and said we're even better together. And then I got asked to speak here, and I thought, well, I can't really say that poor English of even better together. So we're stronger together. So let me give you some rationale. So I shared with you the scale of the attendance crisis. It's huge. And so it calls for teamwork. Funny story, I had worked with this one large school district, and I asked the superintendent, who's in charge of attendance in your school district? And he scratched his head and he goes, who's that attendance lady? It was pretty funny, but also very serious. It showed there was no systemic response, while we really need a lot of people teaming to respond to the crisis. So as we are in a year in which resources are tight and budgets are being cut, we actually have to work more efficiently together. I know, I feel odd. Here we are at an education conference. You had yesterday's keynote where people cried and loved the children, and I'm here talking to you about efficiency. But it really does matter. We need to use our resources well so that we can help more students succeed. So efficiency and effectiveness together. And then we can problem solve together. Thank you, fellow geek, for calling me a geek, because I really think that data, when we combine it, gives us insights that we can apply together. So what I adore about PBIS is that so many things that PBIS addresses are actually the root causes, the contributing factors to our attendance crisis. And then we just save time when we work together. And we can shift from punitive to instruction and support. And I'm still working on my second language of PBIS, but I'm gonna say it as best I can. It allows us to focus on systems to ensure fidelity and sustainable implementation. Okay. Oh, thank you, Ken. That means I said the words right. I really need encouragement, and I need 5 positives to at least 1. Okay, I really do want to acknowledge the great scholarship. Dr. Freeman, thank you so much for really showing how PBIS improves attendance. And that is the research-based connection behind why we're wanting to partner so much more closely. So here's my wondering, and I'm going to spend the rest of my talk wondering, what if? What would it look like if we really tried to integrate attendance and PBIS? And I'm going to have the disclaimer right up front. I don't fully know what this world looks like. I think some of you have glimpses of it, you're building parts of it, and I would love to talk to you afterwards to hear what you're doing in your community, in your state. But I'm going to talk a little bit about what I've seen so far. So I think these circles may appear familiar to many of you. If you created these circles, raise your hand. All right, so what would it look like if we integrated PBIS and attendance? And I'm going to start with data. I know you all like to start with systems, but I'm going to start with data. So, and I'll speak about the data I know about more than I will speak about PBIS data, about behavioral data. So one of the very interesting things about chronic absence data is that it's based on daily attendance taking. And so we have constant sources of data, and it is very predictive. So here's an example of what I mean by very predictive. Somewhere in my first 5 years, when I was still trying to convince people they had problems, we got curious and we asked the Baltimore Education Research Coalition, does the first month of school predict anything? And so they took their data for a whole year and tore it apart by grade and by attendance status, and lo and behold, yes. So whatever happened in the first month of school predicted what would happen for the rest of the school year. It was highly predictable. So you can see, for instance, in the kindergarten, pre-kindergarten row, students who missed less than 2 days continued and were fine, but students who missed 2 to 4 were 5 times more likely to be chronically absent at the end of the school year, and students who missed 5 or more days were 16 times more likely. So this is like, do you all ever watch Star Trek or any of those science fiction things where you time travel back? This is like a time travel machine. You know at the end of your first month what could happen. And so if you could time travel back to that first month of school, what would you do to prevent this outcome, right? Really great use of attendance data. It's also fantastic for using to guide intervention. Now, Swiss is fantastic. Am I allowed to say Swiss over other things? Okay, all right. I don't want to seem to be endorsing products up here. Okay. I'm still new. I got the new guy card for a little bit longer. So you can really use data to guide your intervention. And when you add attendance data to what you're already using, super helpful. Because as you take that data apart, you can use real-time data to take a look at who's having attendance problems at each level, in each grade, in each student group. What time periods are most problematic for those of you who take period attendance? What student groups are most affected? And are there clusters? So I'm not going to show you every visual display. You'll see a little bit more, but it's cool. And there is a lot going on in data right now. Everybody wants Rhode Island stuff because they have figured out as a state, not district or school, as a state, how to provide real-time data, like real-time data on chronic absence. But some of the displays they have also are really important because if you're trying to figure out, well, does it matter, for example, academically, whether students miss a certain amount of school or not, they have this publicly searchable website where you can actually see for the blue, which represents students meeting or exceed. Thank you. Good decoding. You could see that for students who are not chronically absent, so many more of them are actually hitting the mark versus in both ELA and math versus those who were chronically absent. Okay? This is really important. If you're a district administrator and you're trying to figure out, is this particular program or intervention working? You want to be able to look at the effect for students who have good attendance versus chronic absent, right? Otherwise, how will you know, is it because they weren't there versus my program really should be cut, right? You can't make decisions. So that's one piece I would encourage you to look at. We can also use the data to look at patterns. what is happening? Why are all these tardies happening at certain times, for example? Or why are students absent? So one of the very teeny tiny things in here, and I would encourage you to play on the website afterwards, is absence reasons. Why are students absent? Now, it's not perfect root cause analysis, because if you look closely, the number one reason is don't know. But the number two one is illness. And I was fascinated that in terms of the numbers of absences, suspensions is way down on the list. But these are things that are really helpful for us to know with attendance data. Okay, so solutions, so I'm going to talk about a different type of data. Solutions really matter, and they require understanding why students miss school. So at Attendance Works, we traditionally think of these four buckets or types of reasons for student absence. We think a lot about barriers, things that are not within a student or family's control that keep them from coming to school. We also think about aversion, what might be keeping a child or student from coming to school. So bullying is your classic, or poor school climate is your classic reason for aversion, right? I think I definitely didn't skip school, but I avoided school in certain grades because I did not want to be beat up. I learned, it actually had side benefits. I became a very fast runner. But the point is, some students skip school entirely because there's something happening in the building that they're trying to avoid. Then there's disengagement, and we talked a lot about that in 23, 24, when students just did not want to come to school for a variety of reasons. And the final bucket are misconceptions, things that students or families believe to be true that are not, right? So, and you'll see remnants of these misconceptions in your policies. So one misconception, for example, is only consecutive absences matter. So you may have a policy saying, we will only do something in response if you've missed 5 straight days. Well, the research shows that actually it doesn't matter where those 5 days happened. But parents, students, and policymakers believe it. Okay, so we need to understand why. And what I love about the intersection between chronic absence and behavior is that we think about things slightly differently. So we think about, Attendance Works thinks about these reasons for absence in 4 buckets. The wonderful thing is PBIS also thinks about these reasons for absence. I think you call them factors? Factors, yeah? Okay, always checking, always checking. And what I love about this chart is it really breaks those factors into who might have the locus of control over that factor, right? Schools, families, or communities. Okay, all right, so you may have your quantitative data. You know who's missed too much school, you know which groups, which grades, et cetera. You need to know what's going on underneath the data, right? I think one of the hardest things is to listen to people make guesses that are probably not right, that really doesn't frame families in a positive way. So I've unfortunately had to hear, oh, it's because those families don't care about education. Those students don't care about school. And what I encourage you to do is to actually listen to families and students and find out what they're saying. So here's a variety of tools we offer on our website that could be helpful to you. The scan of environment and attendance is kind of a climate tool that lets you look inside the school at what may be happening. Empathy interviews, if any of you do continuous improvement, are fantastic. But my favorite is the 2x10, and I'll tell you why. So at one middle school we worked in, the way the 2x10 works is you say, you have one adult for 2 minutes every day, 10 days in a row, just connect with a student. It's not an academic thing, it's about building a relationship. And what I loved about it was, it was really doable, right? Everyone's like, I don't have time. Well, 2 minutes every 10 days. So we persuaded the team, the attendance team, to do the work. And they came back, and we realized they misunderstood the assignment in a wonderful way. They each took on more than one student. They spent way more than 2 minutes, and they developed fantastic relationships. And most importantly, they learned why their 8th graders were not coming to school. It was an issue of disengagement where the students had failing grades, and they thought, we will never catch up. It was a typical 8th grade catastrophe thinking, right? I failed, and nothing will bring me back. And so because they gathered the data, that staff was able to say, no, that's actually not true. We're going to we develop some talking points. We're going to speak to our students. We're going to reassure them. We're going to make a plan so that you can catch up. And they got those students back in school. But they had to have that street level data in order to get there. Okay, so I think the other pieces, including shadowing a student, is fun. I had one assistant soup who rode the bus with her student to see what was affecting her attendance. And I'll tell you, after that 4-hour bus ride, she knew what was going on. Okay, so that's it for data. So know the quantitative, know the qualitative. So I want to go on to systems, and I'm going to speed it up a little bit, just so that you can do important things like check out of your rooms. Okay, I've derailed your thoughts. You're thinking, I haven't checked out of my room. I'm in trouble. Okay, let's focus on systems. So how many of you have teams at the school level? Can I see a show of hands? Okay, maybe about a quarter. How about at the district level? You don't have to be on the team, just if you have one in your district. Okay, smaller number of hands. How about an attendance team at the state level? Thank you, Georgia. All right. And how many of you have a combined team of any sort at the school, district, or state level? Combined attendance and behavior. I see a few hands. That's excellent. I'll be at the exit door at the end. Would love to speak with you. All right. So we think a lot about the need for district and school teams. I told you that anecdote about the superintendent who said that he only was looking for the attendance lady. After we ended that engagement, he had a team at the district level. And that team was so important because it helped organize the entire attendance response and strategy and looked at their policies and practices and provided support to school leaders. And they began organizing school teams to coordinate the school response, the multi-tiered strategy, matching strategies with root causes, and making sure that they monitored what was happening. So we have, for our thoughts on districts and states, something called the 6 key ingredients. And I'll just give you a couple of examples because we'll have real life examples soon. So for capacity building, one of the districts I worked with decided that they had to both create a community of practice where building teams had a chance to share their strategies. And so every month they met and they reviewed data together, they planned their next piece of work, and most importantly, they had somebody talk about a success, a bright spot in their work. And by doing that, they fanned the flames. They kept the innovation going across the district rather than relying on one school at a time. And they also did have some of the coaching from their instructional leaders for those teams individually as well. Actionable data. I think we've seen a lot in terms of building dashboards that really help take the time that's spent calculating who's chronically absent. It takes all that time away so that people can focus on the solutions. Positive engagement is key. So we really have seen so much in this area. And I don't mean just incentives. I don't mean just, fun messaging, although that's important, but really genuine change in how students and families are engaged in identifying and solving their problems. So strategic partnerships are key because schools can't do this alone. We need adequate resources. Sometimes I've talked with rural areas and they really just need more staff. It's not magic, but it's important to identify those gaps. And finally, it becomes a shared responsibility when everyone knows their part, what they need to do. So not everyone has to be a social worker and visit families and figure out wraparound services, but they have to know their role. Okay, so I know that PBIS thinks a lot about systems and teams and structures. So do we in attendance. And I just want to highlight one of the differences. So we don't mandate who you have to have on the team beyond suggesting very, very strongly that you have a school administrator. You need some specialists, and you need people who know the students and families. But my favorite person, if they have one, is the school nurse. And one of my favorite stories is this school that was elementary school that was a bright spot that we studied. And the parents were keeping the kids home because they weren't sure whether they should send a child if they had some symptoms, minor symptoms of illness or not. And so what they did in the school with the nurse was they had her at the end of the drop-off line. So they encouraged parents to come up with their kids in the car, and they could drive up to the nurse and say, hey, you know, not too sure about Ken today. You know, I really need a second opinion. And the nurse would say yes or no, and the child would get out or get into the classroom. It was really effective because they trusted her. She actually knew how to use a thermometer, unlike me. Okay, so having that team is really critical. And at the district level, I know there's a whole variety of places that touch attendance that you don't normally think touch attendance, right? We think attendance typically lives somewhere in the student supports area, but academics, if you think about those root causes, academics, communications, all these pieces need to be combined in order to provide a system of support. Okay, I am going to just say that this is an example from PBIS world that really shows how you can, how you typically organize. And I would suggest that in terms of the work with attendance, one of the natural places to integrate is at that tier 1 team. So many of our strategies are the same. Why would we want to sit in separate rooms when we're trying to figure out our school-wide responses? Okay. And finally, I'm going to turn to the state level for structure. And I'm really excited that the Georgia team is sitting here because I get to talk about them. All right, so just rewinding a little bit. When we hit that 30% chronic absence and we saw people were starting to say, well, this is just the new normal, we got scared as an organization. We said, this is not the future that we want to live in. And so we decided in partnership with EdTrust and the American Education, I think it's time for a glass of water. In conjunction with AEI, we decided in July 2024 to issue the 50% challenge. Have you heard of it? Has anyone heard of the 50% challenge besides Georgia? Okay, so we decided that to issue a challenge to states to cut chronic absence in half in 5 years. And 17 states and DC responded to the challenge. And so if you're in any of those blue states with stars on them, your state has responded to the challenge. And it's really exciting to see that. We chose that goal not because it was magic, but because it was aspirational but believable. If we had said reduce chronic absence to 0, we would have been laughed off the stage, right? But it's a clear target and it's adaptable to different states, and it's trackable, and it's comprehensive. And it really gets commitment over time. So this is the Georgia example. I give them huge, huge props for the work that's already happened. They joined the challenge just this year, and they're really looking at how to remove barriers. High cost, but it's good. And they're looking a lot at that second piece, school climate, right? How to create a positive school climate, increase student engagement and sense of belonging, and good school-family relationships. I love the little footnote that incentives may not be always effective, because they're not, right? If a student's having a transportation problem, offering them a chance to win a prize isn't going to do a thing. So you really have to remove the barrier. And then what I really want to highlight that Georgia's doing is really looking at how to integrate all those pieces with attendance, MTSS, and PBIS, right? And getting to the why. So super exciting. They're using some of their Stronger Connections grant money to fund this. And they're working with those strategic outside partners like the Carl Vinson Institute that's doing their reasons for absence. So this is really, really exciting work. And I just want to have everyone give a huge applause. They have already reduced chronic absence to 19.5. There's still room to grow. Right? But it's a 5-year low. And what they're showing is that it can be done. So that's the excitement of the state work. Okay, last section. What would it look like if we integrated attendance and PBIS practices? So most people, when I first speak with them about solving their attendance issue, they want outcomes. They want me to say, what is the magic strategy or magic list of strategies you must do today, and then we're done. Maybe they might admit that they need some capacity building or training to apply those strategies. Maybe they might agree they might need data. But what we really have learned that we need to start with is that mindset. If we don't get the mindset, it changes nothing, right? So here's an example. It's a story. Early on, one of my colleagues worked with a high school, and they said, well, one of the strategies is a variation of greetings by the door, just a warm welcome to the school building. So the staff said, we got it. We're going to stand outside every day and greet students and give them a warm welcome to school, and we'll nip that chronic absence problem to the bud. And so they did this for a bit, and then we came back. How's it going? It's great. We're out there every day. We love the kids. We're greeting them. Oh, that's wonderful. Little walk around the school. Ask some of the students, so how's it going? It's awful. They stand out there. They yell at us. Take that cap off. Pull up your pants. Hurry up, you're late. And so the mindset hadn't really shifted at all, right? So that's why we talk mindset. And it's the same with families as well. So we really want to change our dynamics from problem-focused to partnership-focused. And in attendance, that means the first call should not be, your child was not in school today, right? Because if that's your first call, you are in trouble. Right? That family, what are they going to say? Shout it out. What are they going to say? Where were they? Are we in trouble? What's going on? Right? So your initial outreach, hopefully, is to build that relationship. Remember how I talked about that first month of school being predictive? Imagine what would have happened if that first day was a conversation with a parent or a student, and it was just positive. Nothing has happened, nothing wrong. Okay, we do a lot of one-way messaging. We are the Xerox people or the attachment people of the world. And I don't mean like good emotional attachment, I mean like email attachment. Okay? All right? So we do a lot of talking at families and students. We need to get to listening. One mouth, two ears, right? And we need to find out what the assets are. What's going to work for our families? A lot of times we focus only on the barriers and we don't leverage family strengths to overcome challenges. And this is a really hard one for me. And so if you want to confess it quietly to your note-taking page, you can too. We as professionals think we know all the answers. We have lots of letters after our names that say we do, right? But we don't actually. And so collaborating with families, collaborating with students, I love all the stuff I've heard about student voice here. They are the specialists, they are the experts on themselves and their families, and they have to be part of the answer. Okay, so I was really shocked. Oh, by the way, this is a pyramid, triangle. I was really shocked the other day when you were sharing, Brandy, how recently we discovered triangles. I thought the pyramids had been there for thousands of years. Okay, all right, stop messing around. All right, for attendance, we also think about multi-tiered systems of support. And it's really important that we think, how do we integrate the two? I love that you have this strand on integrated MTSS. I've been eating it all up and just trying to understand how we put things together. But for the attendance pieces, I just want you to know what we have. All right, so just like Nicole talked about yesterday, we have tier 1 for everyone. The plus sign, which is our attempt to talk about layering, is about layering on additional support as needed at tier 2 and tier 3. You'll notice some little differences. We really talk about using that data to activate those interventions, right? And at this point, I just want to be really clear. When I say intervention, an intervention is something that removes a barrier or changes a behavior. It is not an action. It is not check, we set the robocall. It is not check, we schedule the meeting with the family to express our deep concern and scare them, okay? It is removing a barrier or changing a behavior. So we use our data to layer on, signal that we need to layer on those additional interventions. And I love the parallels between our work. We talk about positive conditions for learning. That's that funny little base in the Attendance Works framework, the foundational supports. And this really parallels a lot of what PBIS talks about. But we really have seen that students are more likely to attend when they're physically and emotionally healthy and safe, when they feel a sense of belonging, connection, and support, when we offer them something worth coming to, academically challenging and engaging. I loved coming to school just to blow things up. That was so fun. Sorry, I wasn't a great chemistry student, so I can't tell you why they blew up, but it was fun. It was engaging. And finally, students come when they have relationships and they have staff and other students who are emotionally healthy and ready to engage with them. So I just want you to notice the overlap. This is a PBIS slide that I stole. And what do you all talk about? You talk about a place where it's positive, predictable, safe, consistent, and effective. Effective instruction. Huge overlap between what we think about. We just have different graphics. All right, so here's what it looks like at a school level when you're using that data. This is a Georgia example. I want to give them a lot of credit for collecting this information. But what's cool about this is how they're using their data. So this is how they combine the data for Dodge County. And by the way, the 50% challenge, this school has more than met that challenge. They started at 20%, they're at 8.7. Yeah. We all want to know how they did that. But they're combining chronic absence, they're using their STAR climate rating, right? So you get a ranking for the climate. They're using climate surveys, so you have student voice in there. And they're taking a good look at their implementation of PBIS, right? So different levels, and this one's operational. So I just really want to shout out to what's happening in Georgia. It's not only because they committed to the 50% challenge, it's because you all have done years of work to build PBIS upon which this approach to attendance is being layered. So well done. Thank you, Heather George. Thank you, Georgia team. Okay, so this is the what's working in the classroom. And Jeannie Morris is here. I think you actually did the interviews. She actually did the interviews. Stand up, wave. Okay, she's sitting right here. She's sitting right here. Okay, and she did the interviews to find out, wow, this is really great data. What's working? And it's engaging classrooms. There's some grade level competitions, so friendly competitions across the grades, and I love the grade level champion thing. I'm hearing Rocky in my head again. And proactive outreach, right? And it's personalized, I hope, that they're regularly checking in on students who are missing, right? So much of what happens is kind of missed opportunity, particularly at the classroom level. So we found out years ago from the Ad Council research, the most trusted person by families who talk about attendance, guess what? Teachers. They are the most trusted. How often do teachers actually say something after they take attendance? Not a lot. And so that proactive outreach, that piece is the missed opportunity. And then there are things like Saturday school and then PBIS integration at this particular school. So for more details, my friend here who's trying to hide. All right, so we have at Attendance Works with the our pyramid laid out some of the things that we've seen are effective. And here's the overlap again with PBIS. It's clear, concise, consistent communication and expectations about attendance and being on time. So being responsible and on time is a great example of how you integrate both attendance and behavior. So routines, rituals, I won't do every single one for the sake of time. I really do love, this one kindergarten class where every time a student is missing, at circle time, they notice the student is missing, they put the name inside a heart to say that they're keeping the child in their heart together. And when they come back, they welcome the student back, okay? And finally, it's the other one I'll recognize is connection to a caring adult. So if you do relationship mapping, you'll notice, many of you will notice, that the students who are missing the most are the ones that the fewest adults know. And so once you do that, and you assign an adult who cares about that student or is willing to care about that student, you're much more systematic about building those relationships. So this is the example of how you put those expectations into your behavior matrix. Thank you. And we have a bunch of resources that are helpful for setting those expectations. Flyers for families at different levels, health handout. But I would encourage you, you guys are great at teaching expectations. So I urge you not to just take our flyers, Xerox them a million times and throw them at people, but how do you teach the expectation of being ready, of knowing when your child is too sick, okay? And then a final thing I'll share on the communication piece. So we didn't come into the world with no attendance structures. We came into a world in which truancy was the dominant structure. And one of the things I would really encourage us all to do is just stop doing the stuff that doesn't work and make it worse. And besides, you don't really want to do more work, right? So this is a study that we did with an anonymous large school district in California Once you see the end size, I think you can figure it out. But this is with Dr. Todd Rogers at Harvard Kennedy School. And he just experimented to see if we could create a better notice of truancy. And so rather than the one that said, you know, your child must be compelled to come to school, there will be consequences such as court if you don't comply, et cetera, et cetera. It started out with a shorter notification. It was positive. It starts out, we need your help. You know, so-and-so's absences are concerning, and they missed this many days on these days, and we're required to tell you that your student was absent, and they matter, and we're here to help, right? Short, written at 5th grade level, with bullet points so you could actually read the darn thing, right? And it had much better effect. Now, you can replace your existing one. You should really stop the ineffective practice. So I really love, for instance, in Georgia, they decided that they passed legislation that you can't expel a student for being absent. I know you're all laughing, but that law was on the books. And there are laws and practices in other places where you can suspend a student for being absent. If you can make sense of that, speak to me afterwards. Okay, so tier 2, I know you do check-in, check-out a lot, but here are some other things that you can add to check-in, check-out as well, and I would highlight success mentors. We also have something called the Student Success Plan, and my favorite part of it is the Help Bank, where you build on the assets of families. This is the practical tool to do what I was talking about, which is ask the family who can help on days when they need help. Whether it's someone in the house, in the community, or you can introduce yourself as someone in the school who can help. I'm gonna skip tier 3. I just want you to see how similar we are in how we think, right? This is a PBIS slide, really thinking about, as you build your continuum of supports, lining up the reasons why students are missing with the interventions, okay? This is the attendance works thing, but same concept, right? And so when you think of those reasons and you start building your continuum of supports or your tiered interventions or your pyramid, I'm just synonyming my way through the conversation. The concept is that you really are clear about what you're doing and why. Okay, so final reminder, and action is something that is done, and you may have to do it because you may be legally mandated to, so I'm not telling you not to do what you're supposed to. I question whether you should continue to be required, but an intervention removes the barrier or changes the behavior. So I would be remiss if I didn't leave you with our attendance playbook that we produced with Future Ed. This was created, this I think is the 3rd edition. This was created to help you figure out what is evidence-based or what has some evidence base. So it shortens your hunt. So I encourage you to download it. It's free along with the guide. And rumor has it that we're working on a new edition next year in 2026. I think I'm safe vaguely saying 2026. All right, but look for that. So this is our pyramid, giving you an example of what it looks like when you figured out all the different pieces. And the important thing I want you to see here is that it's breaking down silos. You don't have one attendance piece, it's across all arenas. And one last tool for you. So I'm at the end of my time, and I really just want to say, here's the thing that I would love to see us work on. So you have your tiered fidelity index 3.0. Really exciting that there's direct connection to attendance in many of those areas. A lot of indirect connections. And so for those of you who are coaches, for those of you who really think carefully about how we help one another integrate and implement good practice, think about how attendance could be made more explicit in those pieces. Okay, so my last word to you, I hope I've persuaded you that we're stronger together.
I hope I've given you examples, because this is what Helen Keller said, and I think it's true of us. Alone, we can do so little, but together, we can do so much. Thank you.